Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Last night, I spent a few hours live streaming Capes, a new turn-based superhero strategy game from Spitfire Interactive. I had a lot of fun with the game and thought I would take the opportunity to provide you all with some of my thoughts. Now, keep in mind, this is not a full review. I do not have the full game in my hands yet. They're still doing a bunch of work to try to clean up bugs and make it even better. The full game is going to release on May 29th, and I definitely plan to play it and will provide a review once I have finished a full playthrough. So with that being said, this is just a few of my thoughts. We'll start with what I like. I think the premise is really freaking cool. You're in a country where superpowers have been outlawed, except for a few supervillains who are working to round up everybody who has powers and whatever heroes are left. And you play as a team of superheroes who are basically trying to save people that have powers and try to figure out a way to rally and fight back against the supervillains who have taken over this area. The reason why I like the premise is when you play through the game, it gives very strong Dark Knight Returns vibes for anyone who's read that comic strip. It's basically about a world where Batman, he's older, I think he's like in his 50s, and he's kind of last man standing against the tyranny that is occurring in Gotham City and in other places outside of it. Superman has essentially become a government pawn, and that's the way it feels in this game as well. There's one last standing hero who kind of came from the old regime, and he's trying to pull together new younger heroes to help fight back against what's happening in the city. But other people who were on the team he used to be a part of have either basically caved to the government or they flat out have become villains. And so the premise is kind of familiar, but at the same time, I feel like it's well executed. And I really enjoy seeing it in a video game, and it helps pull me along, makes me want to see what happens next. What helps reinforce this even further is the viciousness of the story. I only played about 3, maybe 4 hours of the game last night, but there were multiple scenes of civilians flat out being gunned down. And the game really does a great job of trying to reinforce how desperate the situation is that the heroes find themselves in. And so I think the world building, the desperation, the feeling like this is it. If we don't get this done, the city is basically going to fall to tyranny and chaos. I feel like all of that is really well done, and it makes it more enjoyable to go through the game. I also am a fan of the art. I think all the characters are well detailed. I think some of the animations, they're not as bombastic as they were in a game like Midnight Suns. So you don't have anything similar to Iron Man flying all the way up in the air and laying down missiles. But for what is here, I feel like it's very nice. It's very distinctive. It's engaging, and I like it. I think the game consistently looks really cool. Even in the cutscenes, it took me a while to get used to how they handle cutscenes when you get back to your home base. Basically, it's not a fully animated scene because obviously this is an indie title. They got to figure out ways to cut corners in some places. So instead, they have it where the characters kind of just move around and shift a little bit so you can tell they're alive, but they're not fully walking back and forth within an area. You don't get different camera angles or things of that nature. It's a little odd to get used to considering what I'm used to in video games, but at the same time, I feel like it's very consistent with their comic book style. And I like it. I'm good with it. I feel like it's an interesting design choice. I also really enjoy combat. Combat every single time feels like a puzzle that you're trying to figure out. While I was limited to around 3 heroes for the majority of my playthrough, they all felt very distinctive. They all had several different options I could use at any point in time. And it was really interesting trying to figure out what is the best combination of abilities to give me the result that I want. It's not clear to me how many heroes you'll get throughout the game. I had just recruited a 4th one when the live stream ended, but there's a table in the home base that can fit at least around 10 of them. So it'll be interesting if you're able to get a really, really large roster, because you are only able to bring out 3 heroes every mission. And so you might have to make some hard decisions about who is your favorite. Speaking of which, another thing I find interesting is the leveling system. I put this in a like section, but honestly, I won't be really sure if I like it until the full game releases. Basically, the way it works is you get skill points that allow you to upgrade certain abilities. And you get these skill points by completing missions, but also completing optional objectives within a particular mission. So it might say, hey, taunt this many times or backstab an enemy this many times. And then if you complete that, it's going to give you more skill points when you finish. So it's a really, really cool system because it allows you to level up faster based upon your performance within battles, which makes you pay even more attention to what you're doing during combat, because just beating the fight isn't really enough if you want to get the most out of these encounters. So I like that aspect of it. What I'm not sure whether or not I like is the fact that skill points are a shared resource pool, meaning if you have 12 skill points and you use 6 of them to level up one hero, well, you've only got 6 points left, and you've got to figure out, based upon these 3 other heroes, which one you care enough about to level up more of their abilities. The reason why I think I might not like this is if I have a roster of 10 different heroes, it could be very difficult to try to figure out, okay, which ones do I feel comfortable kind of leaving on the back burner? Which ones am I going to focus on? Can you be in a situation where you're forced to use a bunch of heroes you haven't been leveling up, and consequently they're very underpowered? In other RPGs, you might end up in a situation where a character isn't properly geared, but you don't have to worry about them being leveled because everybody is leveling at the same time. And there are some missions in this game that require specific characters. They're called patrols. And doing a certain number of patrols unlocks main missions. So it definitely seems like the game is going to try to force you to use many different heroes. And so I don't know yet how that system is all going to work. With just 3 heroes that I managed for the majority of my playthrough, it worked great. I had no issues with it. But as your roster increases, I don't know if the system's going to hold up. It'll be very interesting to see whether or not it does when the full game releases. There are a couple of things about this game that I didn't like. While I think the premise and the setup is great, and some of the world building is really cool, the writing could definitely stand to be better. Not only is the writing very mediocre, bordering on poor, but it also doesn't fit in with the world building that has been done. There's a level of viciousness to the premise and how it's handled, and these civilians that you're seeing being murdered on a consistent basis that doesn't jibe with the teenage type of banter that happens between your heroes. When you look at how the game handles the world and how it handles some of the things that the villains do, it feels very, very adult. But anytime the heroes start talking, it feels like Teen Titans, basically, which is odd, which is a very, very odd way to handle this game. Again, I'm going to put this in the dislike section. Maybe when we get the full version of the game, I'll like it more and the writing will make a little bit more sense to me. But definitely some of the conversations back and forth, there were some funny moments for sure, but there were also a lot of cringe-worthy moments where I was like, this is kind of corny. So I don't know. It wasn't as bad as Midnight Suns, where I felt like the writing just seriously detracted from the game. It's not to that point here. It's just that you're kind of waiting for the cutscenes to end so that you can just get back to combat. And that's usually not the type of games that I like, but the combat is so much fun and I'm so into the world and the overall premise of the world that I'm still motivated to plug along despite not really being impressed with the dialogue between the characters. The other thing that I'm not a big fan of is honestly the keyboard and mouse controls for this game. And again, keep in mind, this is the early version of it. So unlike the writing, which I feel like is probably kind of set in stone, How this game is handling on keyboard and mouse might change by the time it comes out on May 29th, but I can't just use my mouse to shift the camera around and look at different angles. I have to use commands on the keyboard to shift the camera around. You can't change keyboard bindings, at least as far as I can tell. If I click an ability and I press escape, instead of taking me out of that ability, it opens up the settings menu. It's things like that where I feel like there could stand to be a little bit more polish with how this game handles on keyboard and mouse. It also has controller support. I didn't play it at all with a controller, but it does have full controller support. And from the little bit that I've read, it handles well on controller. So you have some options in regards to how you play it. And that's it. Those are my overall thoughts for right now. Again, I absolutely plan to circle back to this game. I had a lot of fun with Capes, way more than I thought I would. It was really, really cool going through those combat sequences. I'm all in on the world. And frankly, we don't get very many superhero type games, especially ones that almost have a dystopian take on superhero world. So I really, really like that aspect of this. Many people in the chat recommended Freedom Force and said this game reminded them of that one. I never played Freedom Force, but sounds like it's something that I'll need to check out. But anyway, let me know down in the comments what you thought of this video. What do you think of Capes? Do you plan to check it out? Is there any content regarding this game that you want to see? Let me know. I'll be happy to make that happen for you all, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.